Mhm.
There we go. So my name is Dr. Alicia Schatteman. I'm the director of the Center for Nonprofit and NGO Studies at Northern Illinois University. I've been at Northern for a while, since 2010, I guess. And I'm an associate professor. My departmental home is the Department of Public Administration. And I'm also a joint faculty with the center. So I came to Northern in 2010 when the center was created. So the center is about 10 years old. And it was really created because a couple of reasons. One, we knew that students were interested in working in the space of civic engagement, really interested in taking on work that would help causes, around poverty or homelessness or whatever causes they might be interested in. And there really wasn't any undergraduate programs doing that in Illinois at the time. And that's still the case. We're the only undergraduate student program in the state at a public university. There are some programs at private universities, and DePaul has one undergraduate program, which is like public service, I think is the undergraduate degree. So there was really nothing that existed at that time, and still doesn't. So for 10 years, we've been trying to perfect those things. We started out offering really just an intro course, our NGO 100 course. And then we added our capstone course. So that's been really fun to see the evolution of that. And now we have much more robust programs. So if you go to our website, and if you haven't been there yet, this is a good time to kind of check that out. I'll bring up the chat and put the link in there if you haven't checked it out. But when you go to that link and you can scroll across the top, I can also probably do a screen share here too, that might make sense. So that's the main homepage. From there, you can really look at the courses, the program, all that kind of stuff. So this is I'll share the screen because this is our main website. So from here, you can, if you go up to the top here, academic programs, you can scroll down, and this is a little bit of an overview of the program. And then you'll see the minor, major, and certificate here in nonprofit and NGO studies. So the major, as I said, grew out of these two courses, our intro course and then our capstone. And the link here on the majors page takes you to program requirements. This is the program academic catalog. And so all programs at Northern and the university, they have an academic catalog. You always want to make sure you're in the current year because there's been a lot of changes to the program. But if you really want to have fun, you can click on here and go to other archive programs to see how programs have changed over time. So this is the most current one. It's our current year, 2021. And this is the requirements within the center. So NNGO 100 is still there. It's our intro class. It's the class that is also available at some community colleges. So if you're a transfer student and you're interested in taking NNGO 100, we do have some agreements with some local community colleges, and they offer that class. It might not be called exactly that because they don't have an NGO in the community colleges. Sometimes it's taught by political science or maybe sociology, but we do have agreements between some community colleges, so they offer some of that version. If you're not sure if your community colleges offer that, let us know and we can find that out. Certainly, we know that Elgin Community College does offer it. I know Kishwaukee Colleges has offered in the past. Some of it is dependent on enrollment if you can, but that is one of the requirements that you can take at a community college if it's available kind of in your area. It's a general education class, so you don't have to be an NNGO major, minor, certificate to take that class. We have lots of students. We have about 100 students or so that take that course every year, and they're from all different majors. That's kind of our introduction to the program. So what kinds of things are you going to study when you're in a program like ours? And I think for students, it's useful to think about our major is really truly interdisciplinary. So if you're not sure what you want to do, how you want to focus your career or even your time while you're at Northern, this is a good class to take because it really introduces you to lots of things. And then you can decide, maybe I want to go into this aspect or this aspect. So that's really our Gen Ed course. We teach that every semester. So if you're thinking about taking that class, it's always offered every semester, even in the summer. For the past, in the fall, and then this coming spring, it'll also be offered online. So again, if you're interested in that, we do offer that online, probably in the summer as well. It'll be offered online. In the summer session, they're offered in 8-week course blocks. In the regular semester, it's the traditional 16-week block. But in the summer, you can take that online as well. So just something to think about. Again, you don't have to be our major. That's open to anyone. I think the interesting thing about our program is this interdisciplinary piece. So if you're interested in working in the nonprofit sector or in a non-governmental organization, those are typically nonprofits that are working internationally. They're called non-governmental organizations. If you're interested in working in that, or if you're interested in working in a particular area, say like healthcare, but you want to understand how the organization is run, so the hospital or the hospital system. Most hospital systems, for example, in Illinois and across the country, are nonprofit organizations. Most universities and colleges around the country are nonprofit organizations. Education and healthcare are the two big ones, and they make up the largest percentages of the nonprofit sector. But then you also have down to the very local level of, YMCAs, which are national, American Red Cross, national, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, etc. So we also want you to have kind of that picture that you might want to work in more national organizations. And then you might, maybe you don't want to work in a nonprofit, but you want to work alongside. So government, we have a lot of political science students, for example, that take our minor or even a certificate. They want to work more on the governmental side. But more and more government is partnering with nonprofits to actually deliver public services, either contractually or through grants and funding opportunities that way. Or you just want to know more because you want to be a volunteer, or you want to serve on a board one day and you want to kind of understand, how does this whole thing work? Many of you might be involved in student organizations, and a lot of them are nonprofits. And so you want to understand, well, what kind of regulations are in place to govern those things? Or what do I want to be aware of when I'm trying to recruit volunteers? So it's really a survey class, both understanding the sector as well as getting into a little bit more of the nuts of how you actually run the organization. From there, so again, you can take that at any time. So first and second year at Northern, if you come in as a freshman, you're fitting in 100 as you go. And then you'll see a jump to 300 level, because a lot of you are probably going to take your Gen Ed requirements in freshman and sophomore year. And then you start to get into more of your major courses in junior and senior year. Although you don't have to wait. If you want to jump into, say, our fundraising and philanthropy class, which is here, we don't have any prereqs on that either. So if you want to take that right away as a freshman or a sophomore, you can do that. It depends on how it fits in with your overall planning. So philanthropy and fundraising is a class we added pretty early on when we were developing the program. again, it kind of speaks to the interdisciplinary nature of what we do. So philanthropy is the part that's more on the humanities side. You know, why do people give? I was just having a conversation with someone today about, you know, it's fascinating with someone who doesn't come from the nonprofit sector to understand why would people voluntarily give money to organizations without getting anything back in return. So when you go to buy a $4 coffee at Starbucks, you actually get the coffee, right? You pay $4 and you've determined yourself that that has a value. And you've given those $4 and then you get the coffee. In philanthropy, it's not that. They're doing it for the larger, you know, civic role that they have and different motivations around donors. So some donors, and you probably recognize this, you know, some donors have their name splashed across the, you know, a building or whatever, and that's their form of philanthropy. Whereas other donors, they don't want that. They want to give anonymously, or they don't want it named after themselves. They want it named after someone else, like their parents or in memory of someone, et cetera. So that's the first part of that class. And then the second part is all kind of, again, the nuts and bolts part. So if you understand the philanthropy and giving and this whole notion of altruism and all of that, then how do you learn the science side? So it's the art and the science. How do you learn the science side? Like, who's more likely to give? Do we have, how do we connect with people? How do we identify potential donors? What is the responsibility of boards in fundraising and staff? So that's the philanthropy class. I'm really excited that this spring we have a new person, because I developed this class and then I haven't taught it because I've been director for the last year and a half. The person who'll be teaching that this spring, actually, he's a director in the NIU Foundation, Michael Adzovic. So we're very excited that he's teaching it because he brings that real practical experience, but he's using a textbook that I used and developed. So it is research based, but he really can bring a lot of practice. So before I went back to school to get my PhD, I was a nonprofit executive director, and I had a lot of fun doing it. It is hard work. It's exhausting. You never have the resources, and basically you have an unlimited demand. And so it was great. But I really, really like now teaching for one. And I think all of our faculty at Northern, that's why we got into this work is the teaching part. Some of us also like research as well. So at NIU, that's a balance for us, that we are a teaching institution, but we also do research. So my area of research is in these areas of some of the more applied. I'm a public administration background. So mine is strategic planning, financial management, performance management. Those tend to be my areas. Whereas we have other faculty associated with the center that they do more of the humanities side. They might, and we have several faculty in the center now who study things like social movements, like the collaboration between government and nonprofits around the world. How do we give governmental aid to third world countries, developing countries? All of those things are really fascinating to come at it from different perspectives. So we have sociologists and anthropologists and political scientists all kind of studying those big things. And that's really what is fascinating to me in the center, is we bring those people together, because we know that social issues, you know, like poverty and homelessness isn't solved by looking at it from one perspective. And that's really what's fun for me as the director, to try and bring in all those multiple perspectives. So that philanthropy and fundraising class does that. We try to balance that why we give and the civil society piece with the more scientific of how does this work? How do we use data? How do we create policies? All of those kinds of things. The other course, which is really fun, and I've taught this one too, is our research class. And that's been really interesting to teach, because I think there's some assumption that nonprofits are not as sophisticated as we think. And some of them are very, very sophisticated, that they operate very similar to for-profit companies in many aspects, especially when it comes to human resource management, marketing, communications, all of those things. And they all rely on data. More and more organizations are having to gather research to prove the value of the investment that their donors are giving them, to really do a lot of grant reporting. So what did we do with this $3 million grant, and creating program evaluations and all of those things. So this research class really is practice-based. What are the data needs that an organization would have, and then how can our students really help to do that? So defining an issue, designing a research plan. Everybody's a researcher. You have all researched, you know, how to buy your car, where to go to college, all of those kinds of things. So we try to teach you social science methods to do research, both qualitative as well as quantitative. So interviews, surveys, data analysis, all of those things. This course is only open to majors because we want to make sure that our majors get that course before they graduate. So this one is only open to majors. So you likely won't take this till your junior year if you're a major. That's one of the few that's open to majors only. And then we designed this class, Nonprofit Administration for Social Justice, which is really about the nonprofit administration functions. So that's everything from, as I said before, HR, performance management, financial management, all of those things. This spring, we have a nonprofit practitioner also teaching that one. And this is the first time we're teaching it on our own. It has been taught by political science and public administration for a number of years. So now we're on our own, and we're again designing it with that social justice lens. So all of our courses, that's woven throughout of what are we doing this for? Who are we doing this for? How can we help those individuals and strengthen society? So that this will be the first time we're teaching it as a standalone course kind of in spring. And then you have a choice of an NGO 350, 351, and 352. And all three of these courses were developed as special topics classes. We said, what are we missing in the curriculum? And our students may be interested in getting some of that. So we designed this series of three, and you pick from one of these three. So the 350 was the first one. I designed that, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it really is more of a digital literacy course. Certainly technology comes into play from everything from database and fundraising side, but also social media and marketing. So every time I teach it, and I teach it every 2 or 3 years, probably every time I teach it, I have to start over. You know, when I originally designed the course 8 years ago, we were doing website analysis and those kinds of basic things. And now, you know, last time I taught it, we were talking about artificial intelligence and what is that going to mean? And it's already here. So what does it mean for nonprofit organizations? But then we got into a lot of ethics and access to technology. And, you know, if the pandemic has shown us that it's not equal access, everyone doesn't have the same access to the same resources. And what does that mean for organizations trying to serve communities that have been marginalized or that have not been heard or seen? Who's getting left out? So that's that course. The other of those three then is 351, which is our boards class. That has been taught for a number of years by our assistant director, and I taught it actually last fall. And this is really understanding how an organization is governed and who does that. Who is this volunteer group of individuals that, again, give their time freely, often their resources, to dedicate to these organizations? And what are their legal responsibilities? And they are significant. But also, what are their stewardship and ethical responsibilities, both to the organization as well as the people that they serve? So that's a really interesting class. Again, if you don't have to work in the sector, but if you're interested in serving on a board, that's a lot of fun to kind of dig into all of those regulations. And then the last in those three series are program development and evaluation. That again has been taught a couple of times by our assistant director. And this time she will also be teaching it this spring. And this is all about designing programs and then also evaluating those programs. So in every nonprofit, there's it's basically labor intensive. You're providing a service. So how do you know which programs to start? How do you know which programs are doing well? How do you effectively evaluate those programs? That's what that class is. So it's more the nitty gritty. How do you do it? But every entry level job will have something to do around program level, especially coming out with a bachelor's degree. I would also say some of the next couple of classes are also related to our international. So you hear in our name, nonprofit and NGO studies. Originally, when we were created 10 years ago, it was community development, community leadership and civic engagement. And so CLCE. And so our original alums, that was a mouthful to put on their resume, CLCE. And what does that mean to employers? So we did look at that and say, well, does that really represent what we do and who we are? And nonprofit studies is a growing area, again, interdisciplinary, but it is a growing area that really touches on, a lot of different things. International for sure, but also domestic. And how does that work? So we have a couple of classes on the international side, international NGOs and globalization. That one tends to be taught by our faculty in sociology and anthropology. They switch off kind of every year. So NGOs, these international non-governmental organizations, have been operating for a really long time internationally, right? We've been sending funds, we've been sending people, we've been doing all kinds of things in these international contexts. And what does that do to community? What does that do with the United States relationship to other countries? How are social movements, how do they move around the world? Really, really fascinating. And students generally, I would say, really enjoy that, that course sequence. This one is open to non-majors as well, but we do ask that you have a junior standing. Some of these classes you'll see the next, I think it's, yeah, it is 429. 429 is a writing infused class. And so if you see that in the catalog or, you know, that's promoted, that means you're going to be writing a lot in those classes. That's the only writing infused class that we have, but you will hone your writing skills. And that's a good thing. We want to make sure that you can come out of any degree program with solid writing skills. So this is taught in a way that really focuses on your writing and really reading material that you might not be familiar with, but that'll give you a much better scope of the world and how things work. The next course is a 493. That's nonprofits and community engagement. And, you know, I don't want to assume because we have a class that's called nonprofits and community engagement that that's the only place you get that. Really, all of our classes are service learning classes, our community engagement classes, whatever kind of you want to say they are. We work heavily in DeKalb County where NIU is located, but we also work in the region. And so our nonprofit and community engagement class, this one is only open to majors, because we do very specific community projects within DeKalb County in that course. And so we want to keep it small because we do work a lot with community partners. The last, we have had an NGO faculty teach that as well as a local community member teach that. And we ask that you have 100 and then our 301 class, our philanthropy and fundraising class. You've also taken our research class. So we really want to send our, you know, our best students out there, our most prepared students out there into the community for that particular class. And then the culminating experience is capstone, which comes at the very end. It's your last semester as you're coming out of NIU. Again, it's majors only. And this is where you're doing, you know, you're becoming a researcher. We want to prepare you for the job market and that you are a competent researcher when you come out of the degree. So I've taught it, I guess, 2 semesters now, the capstone class. We meet every week. We talk about your research papers that you want to work on. I give you all kinds of support and help. We do iterations of various sections of your research paper. And then at the end, you complete the final project and you present it to a combination of faculty as well as nonprofit practitioners by the end of the semester. So it's a great class. It's a lot of fun. You get to dig your hands into a real research project. So those are all the classes that are within the center. And then you have courses outside the center. Again, we have a a sociologist, a joint faculty member, Laura Heidemann, and a joint faculty member in anthropology. So some of these classes you'll see are in anthropology and sociology because our joint faculty are there. So introduction to cultural anthropology, and then you have a bunch of choices. That's the international part for sure. And then you have political science, American government and politics. Again, because most nonprofits have to interact with government. Either they're regulated by government, just like business, but they also partner with them to provide public services. So Pols 100 is a basic level understanding of the American political system. And then collective behavior and social movements tends to be taught by our sociology faculty and gets into those larger social issues. So that's it for the requirements that are in your degree. Let me stop sharing that for a second. Get over there. But again, if you have any kinds of questions or thoughts on the curriculum, I'm happy to answer those. My best piece of advice is also to contact our advisor, and her name is Steffi Coomer, and I'll put her name and stuff in the chat. You'll find it on our website as well. But if you really want to dig into the nitty gritty of, is this the right program for me? Should I even think about doing this? I already have some credits from community college. I mean, whatever it happens to be, she has literally, you know, seen and heard it all and can really, really help with your questions. So let me put her contact information in there. And I mentioned Julianne O'Connell. She is our assistant director. Julianne has been also with the program since the beginning. She started out as a graduate assistant and now she's the assistant director. So both her and I have been there since 2010 and can really help with any of the other questions that you might have programmatic level. Julianne tends to work a lot with our ambassadors. And so if you are interested in becoming engaged as a student in the program, then you're probably going to work a lot more with Julianne because she does a lot with our ambassadors, for example. They do a lot of service projects. They really do a lot of engagement on and off campus. You know, right now we're all virtual, which is interesting to try to do a lot of community engagement. But we are still doing things in the community. So we have a very strong internship program that's been going since 2014, I guess, with DeKalb County Nonprofit Partnership. We partner with our local nonprofit community, and students earn a stipend of $575 per semester currently. So that's something to keep in mind if you're interested in doing an internship. We have more internship opportunities than we have students. Our local nonprofits really, really would love to have more of our students, again, because we're one of the few programs in the state. They would love to have more of our undergraduate nonprofit students. So as many students as we can get into the internship program. We have an internship course that our assistant director teaches, and the DCMP program, again, has this paid opportunity that you work with local DeKalb County nonprofits. But we can also do internships, virtual and in person, in other parts of the state, whether that happens to be in your hometown or where you're currently living. We can also set those up, and those can be virtual or in person, and Julianne can kind of walk you through what that looks like. So you're really getting into doing on the ground, working with local organizations right away as soon as you enter the program. In 100, and I was just talking to Betsy Hull, who's teaching our 100 class, they're going to be interviewing local nonprofit organizations virtually, and then doing an analysis of that, you know, basically writing up a presentation about this local nonprofit so they can go very deep into one nonprofit. And when I teach, say, our fundraising and philanthropy class, I have them do a financial analysis. Actually, I had them do it when they did the governance course as well. And you can see, you know, what nonprofits have to share publicly and what they don't. There are many things that they don't have to share, but what we do have in public, you know, that people have to share, like your 990 forms and your information. I teach students how to find them and what kind of analysis they should be doing. And that's just something that if you want to donate, you might want to know how to do that. Or if you want to serve on a board, it's just kind of good skills to learn to do that kind of basic financial analysis to do that. So that's something that I get excited about. Not everybody gets excited about nonprofit finance. Some people who really like Excel, you know, we can nerd out at doing Excel, but you don't have to. If you're more of a qualitative person, you can definitely do things like interviews and just more qualitative things. Many of our faculty are definitely qualitative researchers. We have a list on our website also of all of our faculty associates. So if you're, again, go back to the homepage under the About tab, and you'll see more about our background, our mission and vision are there. Our faculty and staff, as I mentioned, we have two other joint faculty, myself and Dr. Laura Heidemann and Dr. Mark Schuler. You'll see him listed there and all the staff. And then you'll see a tab called Associates. And those are staff and faculty from across the university. Their backgrounds, their interests might be in the nonprofit sector, or they're just interested because they're a volunteer or a board member. So you have a lot of people that you can call upon to get their advice and input of, what can I do with this degree? Why would I want to major in something like this? You know, a lot of people that work in the sector, it wasn't, and just like anybody, every time I interview someone, I'm like, so how did you end up in your current position? And most people will tell you it wasn't something that was planned, especially from the time I was 18, of what I was going to do. So myself, I never thought I'd be a professor, not because I was against being a professor. I just never thought of it. I never thought that it was a career path. I didn't know anybody who was. So it really wasn't something that I had planned, you know, at 18 years of age. And a lot of these programs didn't exist. So for my undergrad, I had an undergrad in public policy and public management because I was working in government. I knew I wanted to be in public service doing something. I just didn't know what. So I took a lot of government classes and they kind of spoke to me. So I would say be true to, you know, your own personal values. If you're more attracted to that public service orientation, political science is a good kind of combo with NGO studies. And that's kind of the route that I went, I would say. I just didn't know that at the time that I would end up in the sector. What probably kind of convinced me is I worked in government for a while. I'm originally from Canada. So I worked in government there, county level government. And then when I moved to the US in 97, I worked in government as well and loved public benefit that I saw every day, because we need a strong public sector. We need the strength of those things that need to be funded at the public level. But then the gap tends to be filled by nonprofits. And that's what fascinated me, was designing those things and creating that space. So that's why I got attracted more on the nonprofit side. And then I did that for, about 10 years, and then went back to school to decide, what do I do next? And really wanted to get into research and teaching. So I would say, if you don't have it all figured out, that's okay. None of us did. None of us still do. There are lots of ways. Sorry, as my phone rings. There are lots of things you won't have figured out at the time. But you'll figure it out as you go. So take a couple of classes. The NGO 100 class is a great class to kind of figure that out a little bit, if that's what I want to do. We've graduated over 225 or so students, I think, over the past 10 years. We have some students who come out of the degree and they really want to do hands-on direct service stuff. So they end up going into counseling, nursing, teaching, one-on-one stuff. And then we have students that say, I don't want to necessarily do direct service. I want to be more in a managerial administrative role. And so they gravitate to more of the public administration classes. They might do an MPA, a Master's in Public Administration, at Northern or somewhere else for that graduate level. But they really want the administration part. And then we have another group of folks who want to go into development, fundraising work. So they start out as assistants in a development office. Maybe you're behind the scenes doing data. And then we have a few students now who are moving into that mid-management level, because we're still relatively new. And so they're now becoming assistant directors of plan giving, assistant directors of something. So they're moving in that direction. Some of our early grads, they decided to, once they were in administration, that they want to move up. So we have a couple now who are moving into executive directors roles, and that's been really fun to watch. And then we also have people who are doing more of the volunteer management track. So they might not do fundraising per se, but they're, the nonprofit sector, many organizations really rely on volunteers. And so we now have alums who are just strictly working on volunteers. And there's some certifications you can actually earn, both in fundraising as well as volunteer administration, if that's, somewhere where you want to go down the road. So those are some of the tracks, I would say. I don't have necessarily the data that says how many go on to graduate school. If I had to take a guess, it's probably 20% or so decide graduate school. Some of them, and that means graduate school in all different ways, not just MPAs, but some folks go into higher education, for example, college and higher education. And then, like I said, some other kind of direct service roles. So I think in an interdisciplinary degree, that field is open, which I know can be scary, because maybe if you take a course that's really disciplined folks, you're like, well, at least I know I'll come out with that and I'll be that. This will expose you to a lot of different ideas, a lot of different disciplines, and then you can decide, well, that I really like this piece, but maybe I like this piece. And it's fun to think about. That's really where we get the hands-on learning in our classes, is testing those ideas, and especially internships, getting a chance to work alongside someone who does fundraising all day, every day. What does that look like? Well, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to do a little bit of fundraising, but maybe not all of that. So lots of different avenues to kind of take the degree in. I'm happy to take some questions or comments if you want to use the chat, or you can unmute and we can just have a conversation if people want to do that too. I've been talking a long time and realized that I haven't taken a drink, so my voice is going to get weird. So Chris, you turned on your mic. Did you want to ask a question? You can if you want.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting started here at NIU in this area of study.
Okay.
I'm working with someone right now internationally and with great ideas. Mm-hmm. And so with great ideas in the international not-for-profit.
Nice.
So yeah, so here in the US, yes, my role will be to be educated.
Awesome.
In the not-for-profit and NGO international studies. So
great.
That's my direction.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, and there's lots of great people if you want to go down that route to get some more information about the folks that have worked internationally. There's a lot of really good faculty who do that. My experience tends to be domestic. Canada, because that's where I come from, but heavily US, but there's lots of folks who work internationally and even started international NGOs, you know, as a faculty member. We have a couple of those at NIU that have started them. They work in Tanzania and Kenya and all over the place. So there's a really a community of international interest there for sure.
Well, yes, yeah. Kenya is my direction in my
nice.
my future goal, to working with
awesome.
An NGO out there in Kenya. So
great. Yeah, we have a couple people working in Kenya. So I say it's supposed to be beautiful. There's a couple, a faculty member. She works in education. I think he's in engineering, and they started a school in Kenya. And they go back there every summer and run the school. And they want to, when they retire, they want to go back and live in Kenya full time. That's where they're both from. And just a fascinating, you know, I've watched the trajectory. They only started about 8 years ago. So it's really fascinating. And when they do fundraising there for $100, that's a lot of money in Kenya in US dollars. And here that would be like, well, that's very nice, but you know, so doing international work and the scale of things and the impact that you can have is so much greater sometimes than what you can have here. So yeah, really fascinating. Any other questions that are out there? If you want to ask a question, go right ahead. I don't know if it's Millicent. Yeah.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm planning on being a dance major and then minoring in this. So how do they pair well, or can you combine them, or like, how does that work?
Yeah, you can totally combine them. They are in 2 different colleges. And, you know, sometimes it can be challenging to work cross colleges, mainly around schedules. So NIU, it's, you know, you can take a class across colleges. It's the scheduling stuff that might get hung up because especially in those specialized areas like dance, they have certain times that those classes need to be offered. So sometimes marrying them outside of college gets tricky. It can be done. One of our alums, he graduated, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, Randus Hopkins. He comes from Chicago. He started a nonprofit, which I generally try to talk people out of, full disclosure. We don't necessarily need more of them. Anyway, Randus and I go back and forth all the time because I know, Dr. Schatteman, you told me all the time, you don't need another nonprofit. So we go back and forth. He was a jazz player, a jazz musician. I think he played the trumpet. And he's one of those individuals who pulled it off. He was in the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and he was in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And I remember him sitting in our classrooms. You could tell this was not a comfortable space. Where we teach visual and performing arts, it's always loud, right? There's always people running around in half naked and clothes, and the ballerinas are always whatever they're doing. And there's musicians coming out, and then somebody's singing a cappella in the hallway. I mean, it's a very fun place, right? And then you come over to the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and you're like, oh my God, like it's very quiet here. And your building is all concrete blocks and there's no windows, you know. So there definitely is that culture dance. You have to walk between the two. I would say, yeah, probably the hardest part is really around scheduling. And then trying to see if you can get your major requirements fulfilled at the same time. So Randus is a good example because he was able to do it. But that will be the challenges just around scheduling. We're a smallish program. Dance and theater are much bigger. So our choices, you'll have courses, but they'll be offered like once and there won't be like 8 sections. Whereas probably dance and theater, there are more sections over there. So you might have to work us maybe around them. But that would be the only real distinction and issue for you. Our friends over in engineering, I think they have the tightest schedule. And so I never see any engineering students because their course requirements are so hard. They don't fit in anything other than engineering. That would be the hardest one. But we do have a lot of students that come from, say, the College of Business. They tend to overlap pretty well. Health and Human Services, all those folks who want to work in counseling and all that stuff, they come over, public health. And then we have had some from the College of Visual and Performing Arts. So very fun. Do you think down the road that you might want to work in an arts and culture nonprofit? Is that maybe where you're headed? Yeah.
Yes, to kind of, combine the two.
Combine the two, yeah. You know, I worked in museums before I went back to get my PhD. So arts and culture organizations are very near and dear to my heart. And they're suffering the greatest in all of this pandemic stuff. And we know that there's some new money maybe coming in this new bill to help arts and culture organizations, but understanding how they work and how they're funded You know, when I first moved to the United States and I went to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and I'm like, $13 for admissions. Like, that's a lot, right? I was coming from Canada. I couldn't understand why they were charging $13. And then I realized, by the way, $13 in no way covers the cost of me entering this museum. So understanding where those revenues come in, how they make their funding, they're fascinating to me because they really have a very mixed revenue stream. They earn a lot from tickets. So that's a big chunk. It's maybe a third of most organizations. That's what they're losing right now, is that big chunk of ticket and revenue sales and, you know, the tchotchke stuff and the t-shirts and whatever else they're selling. The other stuff, the philanthropy, that's going to keep going. Even in the pandemic, people are still donating to arts and culture organizations because they want them to survive. They also, the older ones tend to have pretty significant endowments. The real small theater, music, dance companies, they do not. So they're going to be shuttered and then maybe rebirthed rather than kind of piecemeal it out. So yeah, it's a fascinating subsector really to work in. Fun. Karen, do you have a question that you just turned on your camera, but you don't have to talk?
No, I've been on Facebook Live, but I've been driving. And so I just figured out, I just went back in and register and joined the Zoom. So.
Nice. Wow. I'm a drive thing now. That's cool. Well, I have a podcast, so I am used to people saying, hey, I listened to your podcast on my way home. I'm like, okay, that's weird, but I guess that's when I listen to my podcast. So sure. Anything you're particularly interested in that I can answer or help?
Well, and I don't know if you can still hear me, because my audio is going between my phone and my car. But I actually, and we can totally take this offline. But I actually, I'm not a student. I actually worked in business for 20 years, and I've just started a nonprofit. Yep. So I thought it was funny when you said we don't need more nonprofits. I don't disagree with you on that. But I actually worked for a large global consulting company that did work with NGOs, work with NGOs, and that's what first got me into it. So I heard you guys talking about Kenya. I lived and worked in Kenya for a while with that company, and that's where I started my nonprofit. So I've been going there for about 12 years. And I came across this and I'm just keen to get involved with colleges doing work with nonprofits. With nonprofits. I was intrigued by your program in general.
Great. And we do a lot of, while you mentioned it, we do a lot of free programs that we invite the public to do. So my workshops tend to be around that finance stuff and strategic planning and whatever. But we also bring in a lot of guest speakers. So you'll see them all listed under our events in Facebook. January and February, I think, are up. I don't think I've entered March yet. Or if you're on Eventbrite, you can do a search for us and follow us there and you'll get all of those. We try to bring in guest speakers from anywhere in the country now because we're all virtual. So we have one coming up in February on LGBTQ philanthropy, which is not well studied, which organizations are trying to figure out. Just like anything else, you're trying to figure out different strategies to get at different people. So that's, my phone keeps ringing, which is so weird. It never rings. So we do bring in guest speakers from around the country, academics as well as practitioners. We had some great programs in the fall, and those were also recorded. So you can find them on our YouTube channel if you really want to geek out and look at past events. But we do a speaker a month. We do a lunch hour thing on Tuesdays, once a month on Tuesdays as well. And then we have a bunch that are geared more towards students and a bunch that are geared towards academics. So lots of stuff in there. If you're interested in programming, you can check that out. We do work a lot with our local nonprofits. So we do some guest speakers with them. And then even regionally, we're doing one in March around the impact of COVID. We did one in October, a couple months after, and now we're going to look almost a year after. How are nonprofits faring? Who's doing better? Who's doing worse? So that's going to be a follow-up program in March. So you can check those out on Eventbrite or on Facebook, either way.
Excellent. Yeah, that would be fascinating because I actually spent most of this year in Kenya. I just got back recently, so it's been interesting to see the differences.
We have one faculty member, Dr. Kurt Thurmeyer. He started an international NGO. Again, he didn't listen to me either, so don't feel bad. He didn't listen to me. Him and his wife started it, and they work in Tanzania. And we have a study abroad that he was leading a study abroad to Tanzania every other year. But it include an overnight in the Serengeti, not doing it, and climbing Kilimanjaro. He's been after me for years to go on this thing. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. He's older than I am. He's climbed Kilimanjaro like a few times. He keeps bugging me to do it. So I don't know when he's going to do it again. He was supposed to go last summer and he didn't end up going. But that is the study abroad that many of our students have done. And that's also what gets them fired up about doing international work too. So very fun. We do, to stay on stateside, we do have a couple of alternative spring breaks that we have done. We typically go to Memphis, work with Habitat for Humanity. So instead of going off to Cancun for your spring break, you can go build a house in Memphis and meet some nonprofits who are working in Memphis. We have gone to Louisiana, not during Mardi Gras, but we've gone there. We've gone to Florida, which everybody wants to go to in February. So that trip is usually pretty popular. So we have a lot of connections with other nonprofit organizations in the country, and we tend to do those around those alternative breaks periods. We were lucky this year. We were able to get to Memphis. The students were on their way back to NIU when the pandemic really hit and we had to shut down. So they were able to get home, but it was right at that edge. And they took a bus. I think there was 8 of them that went down to Memphis. So we were able to do that this year. Not in 21, however. So others that are on the call or here with us, do you have any other thoughts or questions? You don't have to answer them out loud if you want. You can put them in the chat too. Nothing else? Everybody's so quiet. I thought doing it at like 5 o'clock, it would be at least a better time, although I don't know why my phone was ringing, but normally it's quiet. But I'm happy to do this again if there are other questions that people come up with. I've been doing office hours, virtual office hours on Mondays from 3 to 5 during the semester, and students can sign up for those if they want. And then that's just fun that I can get to talk to students about anything, whether that's career advice, grad school. Now a lot of juniors are really getting nervous. Should I go to grad school? Should I not? I don't know. A lot of the nonprofits, the people that work in them, these programs didn't exist 20 years ago. So they don't have the background in nonprofit management. They learned it on the job. They started out as teachers and then they're running an educational nonprofit, or they started out as a counselor and now they're running a youth service bureau. That's the reality of the sector as it's professionalizing. So now students are coming out with undergraduate and master's degrees in this stuff, but they don't have the experience. So we're getting some of that experience through internships and employment, but they have these skills and courses that, again, just were not around 20 years ago. They're growing across the country, however, because the job market is pretty good for the nonprofit work. Again, because government is doing less, getting smaller, there's more room for nonprofits that are stepping in to provide those public services. So it's a growing field. Interesting, I was reading some research, this is probably a couple months ago now. Everyone thinks that people who work in nonprofits don't earn a lot. And you kind of go into this almost like charity work, like, oh, I'm going to work for a nonprofit. That's so nice of you. You're not going to make any money. That's generally not true. So the salaries are competitive with the private sector in many cases, especially entry levels. But what we've seen in particular are greater access to benefits. Particularly if you compare same size organizations, for-profit versus nonprofit, they're more likely to have healthcare plans and pension plans in nonprofit employers than they are in private sector employers, for example, when you're comparing organizational size. We're about 10% of the total workforce in the United States. So if you think of that, 1 out of 10 people works for a nonprofit. If you say 1 out of 10, it sounds a lot more impressive than 10% maybe, but both are true. So 1 out of 10 or 10%, whichever you want to go with. And again, it's big because education and healthcare, those are the big chunks. And then you get down to, we were talking about arts and culture, that's 5% of the total sector. It's small relative to the whole place. But once you take out healthcare and education, it becomes a much bigger piece. So you can tell I'm used to teaching, so I could just talk, but. And classes start next week. We're so excited. Even if they're virtual, I still can't wait to see students. This is driving me nuts that everybody's, it's been a couple weeks now since I've been in front of students. So we did a virtual tour of our classrooms because I haven't been in a classroom since last March. And they're adding a lot of new technology to the classroom. So I'm excited for fall. We hope, and cross your fingers, that we're going to be in person in the fall, and or it'll be a hybrid. So students will be able to decide, I might be in the classroom, for example, but 2/3 of the students might be at home. So if you, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable in the classroom, you can be at home. And if you are comfortable in the classroom, we can spread out and do all the social distancing, mask stuff. So that's kind of what we're thinking for fall of 21, what that looks like. It's better than we have now. Not perfect. The audio is going to be not great, but you'll be able to see and hear and do all those things. So when we're comfortable, we'll be there. And when you're not, you can be virtual. That's probably what we're going to move towards as a hybrid model for fall. You know, unless people are going to move faster. But I think, you know, some of this during the pandemic has really taught us that even if you can be back in person, I think it's going to be a while before somebody's going to be really comfortable sitting right beside 6 people and breathing on them, even if all goes well. So we're still going to have some of that social distancing idea, even going forward, even if we're all vaccinated and all that stuff. So I think we're going to be probably more of a hybrid model for fall. We're not being directed by anything right now. We just started thinking about what the schedule is going to look like for fall. We actually, at the university, we have to enter all of our classes in February because students start enrolling in April, which is mind-boggling. It's January, and I'm thinking about how am I going to schedule a class for next September. But you'll be able to see, if you're an NIU student, you start to be able to see the schedule in March. And then you register April 1. So that backs up everything when we have to have our stuff together. But I am excited that it'll be some version of in-person. Some version, I hope. Dance and theater though, boy, that's rough. I don't know. We're not very physical, right? You can just sit and listen, but I don't know how you teach ballet. I don't know. I don't know. I see them though. We share a building. Well, we kind of share a building. If you've been onto NIU campus, if you come onto the NIU campus, you'll see the big, tall, I call it the Sunday. It's the tallest building on campus. It's the Home Student Center. And at the very top, there's a red light. So my kids kind of said, oh, that looks like a Sunday. There's a red cherry on top. So that's what I call it. But off to the left is another semi-tall building. It's 10 stories. And we call it the cereal box because it just has all these little windows in it. That's where our offices are. That's where the center is. We're on the very first floor, really close to the elevator, so you can find us. All of that on that side of the campus is all College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, all those buildings. English, they're all over there, sociology, whatever. So DeSable is usually the building that we teach in, but right beside that is anthropology and the theater. And in that building, when they rehabbed it 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, one whole side is a dance studio. So we come out of my, very prison-like looking cinder block building, and I walk by and it's floor to ceiling windows and they're doing dance, including the faculty member. And I know him, Alex Geldman runs the theater. He's so funny. I mean, he just cracks me up, and he's very sarcastic. So I never quite know if he's being sarcastic, and usually he is. But he's dancing, and it's 5 o'clock and the sun's going down. It's just fun to watch. I'll stand there for a little while and watch him. Because we're over in DeSable, like in the not so pretty building, but it has all the technology, and that's good enough. That's fine. That's the only time and then there's another building way on the other side that I think education is in, and that's where they have some of the ballet classes, because I taught at a theater over there, and I was in the bathroom, and then like 4 dancers walk in with hardly anything on, and they're sweating and everything else that they're doing, and I didn't use the bathroom there anymore because it's all of them doing their hair and whatever else they're doing. So that was the only time I ran into them over there, but that was near the daycare center. So the kids would come over and watch them. NIU has a large campus daycare, and my kids went there when they were smaller, and that was one of their best things. They're like, do you want to go see the dancers? You better be good. We're going to go see the dancers. And so you get the 3- and 4-year-olds, hanging out, watching the dancers. They thought it was awesome. That is a nice thing. I mean, NIU is big in some ways because we're spread out, but then not so big in other ways. You see a lot of other students, a lot of other campuses. And when we're all in person, faculty are on campus, they're there. That's the fun part. Our undergraduate courses in some other universities, just because they're bigger, you have a lot of teaching assistants, grad assistants who are teaching the 100 level classes. And we don't have to do that. We have regular faculty or instructors teaching those classes. So I think that gives us a little bit more hands-on, but also gets to know our students. So what's fun to me is I've taught some students as freshmen, and then I had them in my grad classes. So I had this student for 6 years. What's really funny that students usually don't know is when I run like who's in my class, my roster it's called, when I run who's in my class, I get their picture from their student ID. And that's the 18-year-old kid who I taught 6 years ago, because they don't update their picture. If you don't get a new student ID, you get the same one, right? So I see this 18-year-old kid like, oh, right? And now 6 years later, he's graduated with his MPA and he's working for the village of Schaumburg. It's just so bizarre. That's the fun part. We can see our students all the way through. That's been fun. I haven't had a student that go into doctoral studies at NIU, but definitely masters. A lot of them went through the master's program. Yeah, fun. All right, well, if nobody has anything else, I'm happy to sign off. Reach out anytime. I will put my email here. You can find it everywhere, but I'll put it here. You can email me. I do have regular office hours on Mondays. I put Stephanie's information there. She's really helpful for that scheduling and courses and how can I make this work and what are gen ed requirements and how do I make all that work. She's really the go-to person. She also does all the recruitment for our internship program. And the requirements around all that stuff. So she's your go-to for those things. But anything I can help with, reach out. Anything I can tell you about the sector or connect with any alums that we have. Like I said, we have over 200 now. So there's somebody out there who may be interested in something you're interested in. And they love talking to students because they were you, right? They knew what it was like to, they were, you know, willing to take a gamble on a very new degree program. And so they are very proud alums, I would say, and I'm really happy that they did it. And then they can tell you kind of what they've done with their degree from there. So, well, thank you, everybody. I hope it was fun. Go eat, hang out with your family, be safe. You're welcome. And reach out anytime I can help.
Okay, see you soon.
Take care. Bye.